Evie's first thought was that the wanted posters had it all wrong. This was not an older, scarred man with a gray beard. In fact, no gray laced through his thick, dark hair either. He had high cheekbones above the 2-day shadow that ran along his very hard jawline. She figured he couldn't be more than 6 or 7 years older than she was. If she had to guess, she'd put him at no more than 28. That couldn't be right, though. There had to be a rule somewhere that evil overlords needed to be at least 50, maybe 60 if they were pushing it. But not young, and not even more disastrously beautiful. He was, though, beautiful. His skin was tanned and smooth, as if his time off from terrorizing people was spent lying in the grass, perhaps daintily drinking out of a teacup and reading poetry with his pinky raised. The thought brought a hysterical giggle to Evie's lips. The villain lifted one of his perfectly thick eyebrows that framed the darkest eyes she'd ever seen. Eyes that assessed her in pinched confusion. It seemed he didn't fully put together that she was another living, breathing human being, because he looked at her as if her very existence was a mystery. "You really shouldn't look like that," she said, and she surprised herself, almost thinking the befuddled look on his face was endearing. "He's a murderer," her conscience rebelled. But the rest of her, the part that wasn't attached to her very wise brain, found him far too pretty to care. Taking a careful step in his direction, Evie tried to dig inside herself for the fear she knew was there. Any minute now, she'd be paralyzed with fright and run screaming in the other direction. But he was within arm's length now, and she hadn't turned yet. No fear. But she did feel mild concern, a sound indicator she hadn't completely lost her good sense. Until, of course, her mild concern was clouded with embarrassing thoughts of what he would smell like if she leaned in close and took a whiff. That's a quote from Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. This is YA Book Chat, and I'm your host, Leah Stuhler. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of YA Book Chat. As always, thank you so much for being here and continuing to listen. Today, we are going to be chatting about a very fun and exciting brand new book called Assistant to the Villain, and it is written by Nicole Maehrer. And I am very excited to tell you all that Hannah is here with me today to chat about this book. Hannah is actually a book talker. She does these hilarious villain and assistant skits. What would it be like to be the assistant to a villain? And out of that came this brand new fantastic book. So we are going to be chatting all about that today. So hi, Hannah. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I warned you ahead of time. I may gush a lot about this book
Oh
while we're
my
doing this
God.
interview because I
I will
loved
get
it.
red and emotional. So as long as I can cry a little bit, that's okay. I
Perfect.
love it.
Well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So writing has been being an author and writing has been like my dream since I was a really, really little kid. There's videos my parents have of me on standing on the hearth of our fireplace, like it was a little stage, and I would
Oh,
recite my bedtime stories to everybody. So storytelling was something I always wanted to do, and I'm very fortunate that I have parents that really encouraged that. Every night at bedtime, they would kind of let me control the narrative of the story they would tell me. So there was like one that my dad would always tell us, like about Larry the beetle that lived under our swing set. Like my dad like created that, and then we would create Larry's adventures in every story at bedtime. So it was really great, and that kind of like got me into the storytelling mode. And then I was always watching like fantasy movies and fairy tales, so that like super influenced like the attitude I grew up with, which was like that the world is just such a magical place and stories are such a magical thing. And I feel just so like lucky that I'm able to do that now. And I like fulfilling a dream right now. It's incredible.
yeah, and that's so fun. I love that. Like, I think it's so important for parents to have story time with their kids and to just encourage reading and a love of stories and all things like fantastical and magic because we all need that, we need that creativity and that inspiration in our lives.
Yeah, I so agree. And I actually had a really cool opportunity like not that long ago where I was a social emotional learning teacher for grades first through fourth, and I got to go and teach my first graders how to like tell a story from like an author perspective, and they were so excited, and like they immediately got so into it and got so creative. So I do think it's so important, and it's so much fun, I think, for them because kids have such big imaginations. Watch them flourish. So cool.
That's so fun. Well, this
Yeah.
must be like such a crazy ride for you because you started all of this, as I mentioned, as a video series on TikTok, just doing all these really fun, entertaining videos about what it would be like to be an assistant to a villain, which I'd never really thought about before until your book came along. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, like that's really a fun thing to think about. Like, we always see what it's like on the hero side, right? But what would it be like to be on the villain side? So it started off with this video series, and now you're a published author. I mean, so what has this experience been like for you?
It has been like so wild, and like every day somebody asked me the other day like how do you feel, and I'm like I just every day feel like I'm not like I'm hallucinating, like it's not actually happening. I've imagined all of this going on. So I feel like when I posted the first video, I had no idea. Like I think back to that all the time about how I was actually nannying at the time for twins, and it was the most fun job. And I remember recording that video that morning before I went to work. And I was like, I'm just gonna post it and then I'll put my phone down and I won't look at it again. But I remember like thinking I really want to like make a fun skit dynamic that I can like keep going with and like
Mhm.
stick with and just have like a fun time with. And I was really attached to the idea of like telling a story from like a side character's perspective. And I had done like self-insert skits for a long time at that point where I would post like, this is what it would be like if I was in an enemies to lovers romance. And obviously it wouldn't go well because I'm very sensitive. So if somebody was mean to me, I'd probably cry, things like that. And I was like, what would it be like if I was like the assistant to a villain? And like, what would that look like? Like, what would that job be like? And then after I posted the video and put my phone down later, I picked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of other people are into this as well, which is so great. And I, all the while, I remember even in that first video thinking like, this could totally be a book. Like this would be a really fun book. And my followers all agreed, and everybody that followed along with the videos like kind of encouraged me to get to the point where I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write this book. And I was writing something completely different at the time because being an author had been something I'd wanted to pursue for a really long time. And I was like, you know what? I'm not as into this. And I'm like forcing myself to write it when I really want to be writing the assistant to the villain story. So I sat down and I started typing, and it was like the easiest time I had ever had writing anything. I think because so much of the story had already been laid out, like it, yeah. So that's like exactly every day I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. I like it doesn't feel real. Like, I think like I've imagined this whole, I have a very big imagination, and I'm like, I think it's run away with me. It's not actually happening. I'm so surreal. I'm so grateful because I feel like I've had so many people encouraging me along the way, and I think that's very rare, and I
Mhm.
feel very, very lucky.
That's so cool. And I imagine, like, and at this point, the book hasn't come out just yet. We're just a little bit over a month away because it comes out August 29th. So as of when we're recording this, it's not been published yet. So I imagine, like, when it actually comes out, it's going to be even more surreal. And then hopefully you'll get to do like author events and different things. And that'll just be like crazy, I'm sure, but
Yes,
exciting.
it is like that is to the like most surreal part too. I think like being able to go and see it in the stores is going to be like very emotional
Yeah.
because I think that's like that I have moments where I'm like, oh, this is really happening because like people tell me it's happening, and then I'm like, oh, is this actually happening? And then I'm like, yeah, it is. Oh wow, and then I cry a lot usually.
There will be lots of tears, I'm sure, but that's okay. Good, happy tears.
I cry. Yes, I am like a faucet. I will cry. I cry at everything, especially when like I'm happy. So, so there'll be lots of tears. Lots of waterproof makeup will be worn in the
Hey,
month of August.
that's good. Well, I have it okay, so kind of a two-part question for you. So, as a debut author, and this is your first book, I'm sure there are a lot of things that were kind of like, oh, I'm supposed to do that, or that's going to happen this way. So I'm curious, what's been the most challenging part of the whole process for you? And then kind of on the other side of that, like what's been the most fun part of it?
I think I feel like every time I find out something exciting, I want to tell everybody right away. And I just want to
Mm-hmm.
share it, especially because when I started writing the book, it was such a like a unified process because yes, I was writing it alone, but I would come to my TikTok page and I talked to my followers about like a scene that made me giggle, and it was almost like talking to a friend about it, and we would all like be giggling together in the comments. And so it felt like everybody that's been following with the journey has kind of done this with me. So anytime I find out something exciting and my publisher's like, all right, but you can't tell anyone yet. And I'm like, what? I need to. And it's totally understandable. Like there's lots of things that I'm like, I totally get why I can't tell people this right now. I just have to keep it a secret. But in my head, I'm like, I am gonna Tom Holland this whole thing. And like I really am, and I don't know. So I think learning to like keep things to myself has been a big challenge. I think too, just like learning the ins and outs of publishing a book
Mhm.
traditionally is, and I think there's a huge learning curve to self-publishing as well. But I think each one has their own learning curve experience. And with traditional, there was lots of stuff I didn't understand how it worked. I'm very fortunate that my publisher is so amazing. Everybody is so kind and awesome that they've really supported me and guided me. And my agent has been very great too about like answering all my questions, like clearly enough that I fully understand what's going on at all times. So I have a great support system with them. So anything I don't fully get, they talk me through it. And any moments of doubt, like they're right there and they're like, no, no. And they talk me through everything. So, which is great. So that's probably been the most challenging is like just the learning curve of it all. And yeah, and keeping things to myself because I talk a lot.
Well, and so do I. And I would have a really, really hard time as well keeping the secrets. And on the other side of it, and actually like as a podcaster who interviews authors, and like it kills me sometimes because I read the book and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many questions. Like, what's going to happen in the next book? Right. And then, like, if I'm interviewing the author, like, after we'll record, I'll stop recording. I'll be like, okay, listen, I have this question. I don't know if you can answer this or not. And sometimes they will, but sometimes they're like, I can't tell you that yet. That's going to be in the next book. And I'm like, now I have to wait a whole year to know this. So, like, and especially.
See, I'm gonna have trouble not spilling everything. You're gonna have to be like, Hannah, no, don't tell me
Don't
that.
tell me all of the secrets.
Keep it in.
Keep it in. I will say, like, there's some books, like actually with yours, with Assistant to the Villain, like it's so fun and there's so many different surprises and things. Like, I don't want to know yet, like I have questions, of course I do, but I'm not going to ask because I want to wait and be totally
I love
completely
it.
surprised. But there are
I
just
love
like
it.
some other stories, books that I've read where I'm like, okay, this is going to kill me. Like, I really have to know this. I read Firekeeper's Daughter, and then the second book in the series by Angeline Bully. And there's something that she puts in the second book that is like connected to the first book, but we don't get an answer about it. So, like, the entire second book, there is no
Oh my
answer.
gosh.
And I'm like, and it's a big deal. Like, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's small and according to what happens in the plot of the book. However, based on what happened in the first book to this particular character, like it's a big deal to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I asked her after I interviewed her, and she said, I just wanted to know if we find out like in the next book about this thing. And she was like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I can wait. So, I mean, I get it. I
Oh my
totally get it,
gosh.
but it's like, oh,
No,
it's
like you're on
crazy.
pins and needles waiting. Oh,
But
I've
I
had
would,
books like that before.
yeah, it's hard. I
Oh,
get it. Like, I would have a hard time keeping the secrets as well. So, yeah.
yes, it's true.
So, what's been kind of the most like fun or exciting part of the process for you?
I think just like, well, finding out like something new and exciting is obviously like over the moon. I'm like jumping up and down. And I think I don't know, sharing the good news that I can share with everybody is so exciting because again, it's like it feels like my successes are like something I'm sharing with all my followers, and everybody is so supportive and kind and like uplifting. And it's the other part of it that was so fun was simply like writing the book. I
Mhm.
literally was like a little kid in the candy store the entire time I was writing it. I was like, I'm having so much fun,
That's so
and
awesome.
nobody is supervising me, so no one can stop me from adding this part in. It was it was so my mom would like walk past me and like see me like grinning. I've talked about this on another podcast where I was like grinning like a Cheshire cat. And she's like, what is your deal? And I'm like, I'm having a good time. And she's like, oh, okay. You're
Oh
like
my gosh.
staring at your computer screen, grinning like a little maniacally, like a little bit like concerning. Like, are you okay? It was just so fun. And I felt like I was already so attached to these characters because I've like built them up over the course of the skits. And I
Hmm.
was so eager to like get them on a page because most of the skits are me just talking to a wall. Like
Yeah.
no one else is there. So, or I mean, they're all there. They're all on the other side of the camera. Um, the villain is always right there. But it's like I would always imagine most of it, it's me talking, and then you imagine what they say back. And with
Hmm.
the book, I was able to finally like put this is what how he would respond, and this is what they would say here, and then this is what would happen next, and we get to see it all unfold finally. So it was really exciting, and I'm really excited for when it's like released and everybody kind of gets to see the dynamic that we've loved in the skits on
Hmm.
paper and like see what it actually looks like and how they banter back and forth and all that good stuff. And the villain's point of view was like the most fun thing ever. I had so much fun.
I think, like, I mean, I fully enjoyed reading things from Evie's point of view, but I definitely feel like I was really excited to get to his point of view too. And I had the E version, so I was reading it on my Kindle. So it's not, I mean, it's harder to like flip ahead because it just takes longer, right? Instead of just like quickly turning pages to be like, do I get this? But so I was
Yeah.
like, when I got to the first chapter from his perspective, I was so excited. I was like, yes, I get it from his perspective too. I want to see like what he's thinking and how about her and his kind of inner thoughts about things. So it's a lot of fun. Definitely. Oh my goodness. I just love
Oh,
both of
I'm
those
so
characters.
glad you enjoyed it.
And so you've
Yes.
kind of talked about this a little bit, but like I was curious, what it was really like kind of taking the skits and turning into them into a book. People talk about if they're, like a plotter or a pantser. It kind of sounds like you already had like half of it, right? Done. I'm curious though, if you had you just recorded everything? Had you had anything written down at all? Or was everything just video up to this point and then you started writing it down?
So I would say about or I started doing the skits in June, I believe, of 20. I get my years mixed up because, like, through the pandemic, it's all a blur. I think it was 2021. I'm pretty sure. It's been 2 years. So when I posted the first one and then I continued to do them, it was like so much fun. And then I started in my head to like daydream about scenes,
Okay.
about what it would look like on paper. So like this is what this scenario would look like, and this is what that scenario would look like. And that's usually how my process goes with any big scene that I'm like really excited about. I will like listen to so much music and just daydream it up, and then I sit down to write it. So with Assistant to the Villain, that was kind of how it was. I would like daydream about these characters that I was thinking about in my head and talking about in the skits. And then I think around September is when I sat down to start writing it. But when I did sit down to write it, I was very determined to have it like be something fresh and new, even for the people that have seen the skits.
Hmm.
So it doesn't follow like the same exact storyline of the skits because I feel like the book is kind of a more well-rounded arc, whereas the skits are just a constant continuation of each other, which I love also so much. So what the book sort of was in tandem with the skits is me taking like very familiar things from the skits and all like the most important elements, which are like the characters, the character dynamics, the comedy, the like ridiculous situations they get themselves into, and like the fun of it, and put it around like a central conflict that they all have to deal with. And I sort of like combined a bunch of elements, conflicts they've faced in the skits, and just kind of reworked them a little bit in the book so that if you've never seen the skits, it will still make so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have seen the skits, you'll read some parts and be like, oh, hey, I remember that storyline from when I was watching them. Or, yeah, and all the characters have stayed the same. But this, and it's sort of in the same way that like the skits, their whole thing is like, how do we defeat the heroes and all of the hijinks that happens around that. And that's sort of what the book is as well. So their core elements are the same. There's some differences from the video skits just to keep it fresh and interesting. And it's book format, a little bit different than skit format.
I mean,
yeah,
and that,
so
you know, that,
really
that makes perfect sense. So yeah, you don't want to write something that everybody has already heard, right? You got to make it like fresh and new and different and interesting, but still have those characters and that quality that they're familiar with and that they want. So yeah, that makes sense.
My goal was to have people that watched the skits read the book and have that same feeling you have watching the skits, but you don't know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Was the biggest thing for me. Because I was like, I want everyone to be surprised about the direction this takes, but I still want everything to be the same in respect to the characters, the banter, the Grumpy Sunshine dynamic, and everything else. So most all of it has been, I hope, has been translated pretty directly, but some of the storylines are a little switched up, which is fun.
They are
but more fun for me too.
Right? Because then, you know, going back to like secrets, while it's hard to keep them, you have these fun little secrets that your readers don't know yet. And so, you know, or your viewers of your videos don't know. And so then you get to surprise them with these fun little things and see how it goes. So
yes. And there's like a little nugget in there because in the skits, Evie's always talking to someone in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And I get all these questions like, who is she talking to? Who is she talking to? And sort of a little salute to everybody that's been watching the videos and like the skits. Like Evie, and I've known this for so long, I just never told anybody. And I did reveal it in an episode not that long ago. But Evie's basically breaking the fourth wall and talking to the reader, and talking to who's watching the video and telling them all of her gossip and her story. So in the book, you probably read the scene where Evie's like talking to like a window where it's like a sun shining on a book. And that's supposed to represent the reader, the viewer, the person like reading the book right now is kind of like her light and her way to turn to. It's like just a little salute to everybody that's supported and followed along and been so wonderful. So I wanted to, that was like really important to me that there was an element of that. That wasn't like too obvious, but that everybody would understand what this means. So yeah, it was really fun putting like those little elements throughout. That was like a little salute to the TikTok series.
That's cool. I love that. And it's so fun to me that, you know, when something like this happens where it's gone from TikTok videos to a book, because it's such a different like creative process. And I think like it's going to give your readers and your TikTok followers like kind of almost feel like they have an investment in it, you know? And like that happened with another book series that I read, The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. And she's got her second one coming out in August too, I think it is, or in the fall. Anyway, it's coming out this year. And it was the same thing. Like she started on social media, like talking about this and developing this. And her followers were like, oh, what if you did this? Or what if you did this? And then she wrote this book out of it. Like, it's just so cool because it gives all your followers like kind of a piece of the action, you know, they're like, I helped with that, or, you know, which I think is cool.
Yeah, because they really do. They're like the reason I felt so encouraged the entire time. I think I really struggle with my mental health. And there's days where doing simple tasks can be really difficult. And it was very motivating to me to make these videos and have people in the comments be like, oh, this made my day. I was having a rough day and this made me so much happier. And I'd be like, that to me helped like me do like all the things like right. And it made me feel like, oh, something I'm doing is making someone feel good. So I'm doing something worthwhile right now. And it made it the whole process much easier than it would have been had I not had that and been just trying to write it with, with those issues in mind. So it was, yeah, I feel very, very, very super fortunate. I'm like so grateful. I say it like all the time because I'm like, I just am. I'm so grateful all the time.
Well, that's
It's so
awesome.
wonderful.
It is. And it sounds like you had a really great, support system too, with helping you as you've kind of developed it and along the way, which is really awesome.
Yeah. And I feel like my family was really encouraging too. And they've always been very encouraging of like my creative pursuits, but they love when I get excited about things and because they're like my family and they want me to be obviously anyone you really care about, you want them to be excited about stuff. And yeah, and part of that, yeah, with I deal with depression and anxiety. So with depression, sometimes it's hard to get excited about things that you want to
Mm.
be excited about. So when I find something that really makes me light up and feel good, it's really a big, big deal. And this was something that anytime I would talk about it, my family was like, you get so animated and you get so like smiley and you can just tell you're really happy about. And it is, it's something that really just brings me so much joy and like good feelings. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that is so fantastic. And I can tell too, just from, the videos that I've watched of yours, whether it's on your TikTok page or on your Instagram too, like when you are talking about it, that is how you are. You are so excited. And I love watching it because then it makes me really even more
Oh,
happy. And so
oh, that makes me so happy too. I love that. I
you
love that.
you have definitely written something that is going to make people happy. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, from the first like couple of pages when I started reading this, I was just like, had a smile on my face the whole time I was reading it. I laughed out loud. I don't even know how many points. Like, I read through it so fast and was like, I'm just gonna read this book all the time, like, because this is so fun. And this is like, it's for me, it felt like it would be like my happy book. Like if I was struggling, with something, or like I read a book that's,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I mean, it's because it's like, and sometimes you read stuff that's like, I mean, I read all the time because I love to, but also for the podcast, obviously. And so
Sure.
sometimes I read things that are darker, or like I just read an arc of a book that was like, it's like a horror and it's super creepy. And I was like, okay, I need something like
Oh
light
no.
now to refresh and make things. So I feel like your book is like the one that I can go to be like, okay, now this is going to make me happy again. This is fun. I love it. So it's fantastic. And
I love that makes me so happy.
good. And I think everybody who reads this book is just going to really enjoy it. So why don't you tell everybody what Assistant to the Villain is all about?
Okay, I'm gonna get better and better at this. Each time someone asks me, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so bad at describing everything. Because I either over explain or under explain. I'm gonna try to be in the middle though. So it's essentially a workplace romance, but in a fantasy setting. So it is about this young woman who is in need of employment. She is kind of the epitome of bubbly, sunshine, fun. She's very easygoing, who ends up working for the quote unquote villain of the kingdom, who is feared by all. He's very grumpy and grouchy. And essentially, after she starts working for him, things start to go awry in the office, and they together have to figure out who in the office is betraying them to the heroes of the story. So there's a mystery element to it. It's definitely rom-com in a fantasy setting sort of vibes. But yeah, a lot of comedy. I'd like to think a lot of heart.
It's so much fun. And so, of course, we have Evie and the villain, who are our main characters, but all of the like supporting cast of characters are fantastic too. Cause I feel like as I was reading it, I was like, yeah, you have like, if you work in an office type place, and I have worked in an office environment before, there are those different types of people, right? And so in your characters, in Becky and the dragon tamer and like the guy who works in the kitchen, like you definitely see the different personalities of the types of people who you would work with in an office setting, which makes it even more funny too, and just more relatable. And then you're like, oh wait, they're all working for the bad guy, right? Okay, so which is just so fun. And one of the things that makes this book so hilarious is because we do have that like grumpy versus sunshine trope. And so it creates a lot of these like really hilarious moments. And Evie just says like the funniest thing. So, for an example, she says to him, inherently evil people should be grotesque looking. You can't just kill people and be pretty. It's confusing. So, like, she calls the villain pretty, and he's like, what? Did you just call me pretty? So like there's all these super fun moments with this grumpy versus sunshine trope. So talk to me about like what it was like just creating these two characters who are totally opposites and just putting them together. And then, are there any like moments between them that are not spoilery, that are your favorites?
Oh, so many. I feel like every time they interact, I'm just like a little kid and I'm kicking my feet and I'm like, because I think with them, I love like the villain's character because he's so like he's kind of created this what he thinks is an impenetrable wall around himself, and he's like, no one's gonna get in, and he's like, peekaboo, here I am. Hi, I'm here. Anytime he thinks he's like a semblance of like order back, she just completely undoes it in her own way. However, she's decided, I'm going to challenge him a little bit. And he's not really used to being challenged in the way, at least in the way that she does it. Like he's used to like, okay, let's sword fight. Let's duke this out. She's like, hey, feelings aren't bad. You need to like relax. Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? You need some coffee? You grumpy? Like, what's going on, dude? And she's not afraid to like poke at him and tease him a little bit. And he's very unused to being teased and having someone like push him a little bit out of his comfort zone. He's used to like living comfortably in like the little bubble he's made for himself, his evil little bubble. And I always say like Evie goes up to the bubble and goes, stop. Stop. Like every opportunity she can. Their first meeting is like one of my favorite things because, and I like that it happens like early on in the story because everybody gets it kind of right away. But it's their first meeting is so funny because he's used to everyone's scared of me. Everyone that meets me and knows who I am is afraid of me, and people run away from me, and people like respect me, but in like I don't want him to hurt me kind of way. And here's this girl that seems like she should also be afraid of me, but she's like, you're really pretty, which is weird because you kill people. Like, I don't understand. And he's so thrown by her like casualness with it all that he's like almost intrigued by it. Like, you've got a couple of loose hinges as well, I think, because you're so okay with what I do. So I think all of their moments together, I just love. I really love their first meeting. I feel like I've talked about it a lot on my page just because it's like one of my favorite scenes in the book. But there are so many that I just, anytime like he's trying to explain himself, there's a scene where he's trying to apologize to her. I won't say for what, but he's attempting to apologize and he doesn't apologize for things. He has no idea how to do this, but he's given it his all. Like he's genuinely trying. And she's just like, I'm scared of ladybugs, like interrupting him. And he's like, I'm trying to say sorry. You're confusing my head. So yeah, every scene that they're interacting, I'm happy.
It's just so hilarious, all of their interactions. And we're going to talk more about Kingsley a little bit later. But what I love too is like as soon as she starts working for him, like we have this scene where she goes into the villain's office and says something is herself, walks out, and Kingsley holds up the sign that just says trouble. And that's all that needs to be said. Like the villain is in trouble with this one. And it's so very clear. What's fun too is, we have, of course, Evie and the villain, Grumpy Sunshine, but we also really kind of have that with Evie and Becky because like Becky is this like total grumpy, like she is that office person who you love to hate. You know what I mean? Like you just don't, you can't get along with them. And like, she's mad at Evie all the time. So that's a really fun dynamic too. I love it. We get two of those.
They are my favorite thing ever. And I think and I've been like this with like my own friends where I've met people that are very like not closed off, but they're like not as, I'm very like when I meet new people, like, hi. And I'm like very like in your face. Even though I have social anxiety, I'm so good at masking it with new people. And then and I'll meet new friends and they'll be, and I just kind of, I'm like, I'm just gonna bother you until you like me. I'm just gonna be in your face until you're my best friend. And with Evie and Becky, Becky is just, she's a person that likes organization. She likes to be
Mhm.
organized. She likes everything in order. And then in comes this girl that like just screws up the whole dynamic. And everyone in the office too. She's like, I just want everyone to like listen to me, so I my job is not harder. And everyone's like, well, we work for a villain, so we can't always keep
Mhm.
things in order. So Evie's kind of like her exact opposite. So they clash a lot because Evie is like organized chaos. Like she figures out how
Mhm.
to do things, but she's not orderly in the way that she does it. Becky gets things done, but she is very orderly when she gets things done. But I have such a big heart for tropes where, especially two like female characters start off like really not liking each other
Mhm.
and then end up being really close. I'm not saying that's what's happening with them, but that but I like the idea of watching a friendship between two women develop over time. And somebody the other day compared them to Vivian and Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. And I was like, that's exactly it. That's exactly their dynamic. I
It
was like, that's
is.
100% accurate.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're saying that now, and I'm like, that is it. That is them. They are Vivian and
Yeah.
Al. And that's so fun.
Yes. Because like she's like in these bright colors, like coming in like, hey. And then here's this girl that's like, this girl has no idea what she's doing. Not a clue. And they
Oh.
both kind of learn about each other as we go. But yeah, Becky
Mhm.
is super fun, and I like her interactions with Blade as well. They've kind of got a grumpy sunshine dynamic as
Yes,
well, which
they
is
are
so
very fun.
fun.
I
I
love
enjoy them
them.
as well.
We also get another fun trope that we have is like villain gets the girl. Okay. And I mean, everybody needs somebody, right? The bad guy still needs somebody. He's the villain, but he's got to have somebody. So I knew like from the moment that Evie made the villain laugh for the first time that he was in trouble. It's like there's no hope for him after that. And that was like that's one of my favorite moments in the whole book because she falls off of her chair, hits her bum on the floor, right? And he wants her to go to the healer to get it looked at, and she's like, no, I'm fine. But then she tells him, best to keep this between us, or it may enlist the other chairs in a revolt, and which is hilarious, right? And he laughs, but then she's like, it really wasn't that funny, but it is funny, and
Yeah.
he laughs, and I was like, oh, he's done. Like this is it. She made him laugh. He's the bad guy. He just lost it, and he's in trouble. So, and like
I know, I love that scene too.
there are so many just fun moments like that between them, and they both try to like convince themselves that they shouldn't be thinking these things, like she's like, stop
Yes.
trying to get the boss to laugh, stop finding torture attractive, Evie. Like she talks to
Yeah.
herself, and he's
Oh yeah.
he thinks that she's like disgustingly distracting and making him feel
Yeah.
vile things like joy, which is so
Yeah.
funny.
Ew.
And
Yuck.
it's funny when other people point out to him too, like Kingsley or like his acquaintance will say, who they meet in the tavern, and
Yes.
the villain laughs then, and his acquaintance is like, you're screwed because you laugh.
Yeah.
He's
Like
just like,
what?
shut up. So but yeah, so this is such a fun trope too, with villain gets the girl. So talk to me about what it is that you love about this trope. I mean, this is essentially like inspired so much of the story.
I think I've always, since I was really young, loved villains to the degree like, and I think it was mostly that I see so much humanity in people, and I think I've always been a very empathetic person. So when I look at someone who doesn't do the best things, I like want them to be better, and I like want to believe in humanity that like you could be better, or like you're maybe not that bad. Like that would make me feel better about humanity. So as a kid, I would look at like villains in Disney movies, and I would literally be like, I could make them love me. I could. I would try. I would give it my best. Like I remember turning to my mom with, I think it was like the Hercules movie, and being like, I think Hades and I would be like best friends.
Oh.
And she was like, I was like a little kid, and she was like, okay. He's the bad guy. And I'm like, but he's funny. And he's fun. So I think I've always been attached to villains because I always think too it's fun to watch a character kind of skate the moral line and like how
Hmm.
much will we forgive them for? Like how much can we understand how they got to where they are? Like villains always have such a interesting way of like how they got to the point that they're now evil or they're now like mostly evil and that they don't do the best things. But I too like I think when Once Upon a Time, the TV show, they had
Yes.
such great examples of that, of like villains that you start off like not being a fan of, but you see like that there could be
Hmm.
goodness, that you're like, all right, they could be, but you also understand a lot of those characters. I was like, I get it. I would be mad too.
Oh yeah.
Don't know that I would burn a village to the ground, but I understand how you got there. You might just need to go to therapy and talk to somebody,
Yeah.
but I get it. I get it. I get how you got there. So with villains, I loved the idea though of like putting a villain in like a comedy setting where it's very hard for them to be evil because people are always like joking with them and making them laugh and like kind of again taking like that evil bubble they surrounded themselves with and
Hmm.
be like, but what if I make a joke and make you think I'm funny? Then what? Then what will happen? So that's sort of the whole book was like, I just want to take every serious situation and see like how can we make this funny? Like how can we laugh our way through this part? Because especially with a character that's supposed to be very stoic and like cold and
Hmm.
like almost calm to the point of like, do you not feel anything? Like a glacier of a person. And just see what happens when you throw someone who is just like a tornado cannonball at them and be like, well, let's see what happens. Have fun. Enjoy yourself.
Yes. And it is fun to watch him like slowly kind of his facade slowly kind of crack and crumble as we go throughout the book. And for him to, when he, realizes this is what's happening too, it's so fun to see that change from the start to the finish and what happens at the end. And with Evie too. I mean, she's more willing, more, I guess, admits her feelings to herself more, although she does still try to block them in some ways. But she is also like, and she makes all these like little comments to him. Like she gets so flustered and embarrassed, and then she talks about like dreams that she has, and then drops a word like naked, and then is like, but I didn't mean you. No, nobody was, like she just does all these little things, and so you think like, yeah, I mean, he's totally doomed. How can he not fall in love with that? So,
I always say that I have no speed bump between my brain
mm.
and my mouth. Like things come out and I'm like, no, no. But then it's already out. It's too late. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be something that haunts me at like 3 a.m. in 5 years. Like when I'm going to bed at night, 5 years from now, I'm going to wake up in like a cold sweat. Like, oh my God, I said that thing a couple years ago. It was so embarrassing. Like that sort of thing. But he is so not used to that, the breaking of
Mhm.
decorum, because people are so careful around him. And Evie sort of just isn't. She just lets go whatever she wants to say. And that's why he likes, oh, well, he'll pretend he doesn't, but that's why he
Mhm.
likes being around her because she doesn't hold up that pretense. And I think she helps encourage other people in the office also not to. Like Blade started
Mhm.
working there after Evie, and he sort of has a similar rapport with the boss where he's a little timid, but not
Yeah.
quite as much as other people are because he watches Evie do it. So he's like, oh, I could get him to like me too. Like, but that's kind of opening the door. Evie and the villain are kind of meant to be almost mirrors of each other in a way
Mhm.
because he is very like walled off with his feelings in the way that he just doesn't want to emote at all. And with Evie, she thinks that the only like appropriate emotion that she can share with other people is like, I'm fine, everything's good,
Uh-huh.
happy, I'm fine, everything's good. She's like a people pleaser to an extreme extent where like if there's a body on her desk, she's like, oh, I don't want that there, but I don't want to be rude. And not make them move it. What do I do? So they're meant to be sort of kind of a way of being like, all right, well, they're both not very good at expressing their emotions in a healthy way because he doesn't want to express them at all. And Evie doesn't think it's okay for her to just be sad. Like it's okay to be
Hmm.
sad or angry. And she worries about those things because she doesn't want to burden other people with anything but, hey, I'm fun. I'm Evie. You want to be around me, right? Because I'm happy all the time and I'm fun to be around. Be around me, please. Like she's so desperate for that connection. So she kind of walls herself off. And he does the same thing, but with each other, it's kind of easier for them to just both be like, all right, you know what? We'll just drop it for a little bit. While we're together, I can laugh a little bit. You can cry. Like everything's fine. So that's sort of what I love about them too, is that they kind of reflect off each other nicely, but in a very different way.
Yeah, they do. And I love, like what you've said and about looking at the villain from this perspective, because like, I mean, I actually thought about the TV show Once Upon a Time also when you were saying that. And then I think of like the Disney movie of Maleficent, like after I saw that movie, I was like, I will never look at Maleficent in the same way again, and I'm like, this is my favorite story. This is the one that I'm keeping now in my head is that version. And, even with like Marvel, thinking about Loki, like the same thing, right? Loki's supposed to be this bad guy, but then you're like, no, he's really not. And he does have a good side to him and he's got this motivation. And, and I watched the Loki show on Disney Plus and I was like, I'm totally in love with him now. Yep. Okay.
Yes, you want to
Like,
find the humanity. It's so true. And it's so funny because I just like had a core memory come up because the Maleficent movie was such a like turning on our head what we think we know about
mhm.
a bad guy. And it was in fourth grade. I remember we read a book that I think is you could still get it now. It was like a playoff of the Three Bears, or not the Three Bears, the Three Little Pigs story,
Mhm.
where it it wasn't that the wolf was actually trying to blow their houses down. He had a cold. So he was sneezing a lot.
Aw.
And that was the whole story was that this whole time everybody's been painting him like a bad guy when really the poor guy just had a cold and was sneezing in the wrong places. And a part of our project for that story was that we all had to write we had to kind of like do a twist on a fairy tale. So I did Snow White where the evil queen wasn't actually evil and
Mhm.
the prince was actually the bad guy or something. Like I remember we still have it somewhere. I called it like Snow White and the evil prince. I like remember it so vividly.
Oh,
And I'm like, we look at that though, and my mom's like, the pipeline is clear how you got from here to here. It all makes sense. It's
mhm.
all coming together. But it's so true. Like we want to see, it's nice to see a redemption because it makes
Mhm.
you like hopeful about people and about the world. And in these stories, it's like the most extreme form of it. But you think about like little mistakes we make in life, like you can still be redeemed from like not obviously not quite that extreme in the real world,
Right.
but in a fantasy setting, there might be more stuff we're willing to forgive than in the real world. But yeah, it's a similar, super similar thing. Like there were so many characters
Mhm.
in Once Upon a Time. I feel like that started off as like in the beginning, we were like the evil queen, like we don't like the evil queen. And
Mhm.
then they showed that episode like how she became the evil queen. And then you felt like some
I love
sympathy for her.
you.
You were like, I kind of
Yeah.
feel bad. Like, I want you to be happy. I'm sad for you now.
I just
Had it
kept on.
rough.
That show was so aggravating for me to a point because I like every time she would like seemed like she was going to get a man, right? And have her guy, they would get taken away from her. And I just kept on like yelling at my TV, can't you just give her some happiness already? Like she deserves it right now.
Yeah. And
So,
when people would like judge her for being the evil queen, I'm like, she's past that. She's done a lot of
mhm.
good stuff. Everyone needs to get off my girl. She's having a rough week. Leave her alone. So yeah,
Totally
I
agree.
feel like Once Upon a Time was such a good, fabulous example of
It
like
is.
the villains kind of on their head. Captain Hook deeply
Oh,
changed me forever. I
same.
can't even really talk about him without getting like red because he just really
Mhm.
was just like the epitome of like this bad guy that was like, but I will be good for you, but I will be good if you
Uh-huh.
want me to be good. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's the
Okay.
guy that from the cartoon. I was like, when he first came on screen, I'm like used to like the Disney Captain Hook. So I was like, or like or Dustin Hoffman's Captain
Right.
Hook from the Hook movie. And I'm like, I'm used to him like having curly like perm hair and like a wax mustache. And I'm like, why am I feeling things for Captain Hook
Right?
right now?
Who is this hot man in front of me?
He was so cute. I was
Oh
such
yeah.
and the Vampire Diaries too. I feel like the Vampire Diaries was another show that like made you love more like great characters and
Mm-hmm.
feel like, ooh, I could change him.
Yeah.
If he met me, I could help. I can
Yes.
fix it. It will be delusional and I will pretend I can fix this person.
Oh, well, okay. So we've talked about a bunch of the characters, Evie and the villain, and Blade and Becky. And I even mentioned he a troll who works in the kitchen, right?
Oh, he's an ogre.
The
His name's
ogre.
Edwin.
Sorry, Edwin.
He loves to read. And then,
I love him
yes,
too.
he's the best.
I do have to say though, there was one character in this book who just particularly stole my heart. And that is Kingsley. Okay. I mean, he's a frog who wears a crown on his head and he speaks by using these little cue cards. Like, and he's always right, of course. And I just was like, he was just so much fun. I was like, is Kingsley gonna say something now? What's he gonna hold up? What's his cue card gonna say? And he wears a crown. So I'm like, he's probably like an adorable little frog. And what's hilarious too is that Evie dotes on him. Like she holds him and kisses him, and which makes the villain even more annoyed at her. And so he's just this fun character. So now I've watched a bunch of your TikTok videos, but I haven't seen all of them. So I didn't know if Kingsley was one of the characters who you had in the videos or if he was new. Talk to me about how Kingsley came about.
So Kingsley is actually so fun because just like how like the skits to book is like a more unconventional way of, like mapping out a story.
Mhm.
Kingsley was kind of an unconventional add-in as well because so we have to give so much credit to Elizabeth Stokes who did the cover of the book. She incredible. Like the cover alone is amazing.
Mhm.
When they first showed me the cover, I forgot it was months and months and months ago. And when we were still doing like big picture edits on the book. So we were still tweaking a lot of stuff, moving scenes, things like that. And they showed me the cover art and then they showed me the frog. So Kingsley was not originally in the story. They actually showed me the cover art and showed me like this little frog with a crown on. And then me and my editor were talking back and forth, and I was like, I love him. I love him. He has to be in the story. And she was like, yes, he does. Yes, he does. So we started like back and forth. All of us kind of were like, oh, his name is Kingsley. And this is like how this is how he got here and blah, 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 blah. So I went back into the story and I found gaps. And it was so bizarre because when I was going through, I was like, he fits here so
Mhm.
perfectly. It was almost like he was waiting to be put in because I was like, what was the scene before he was in it? It did not make as much sense. And I was like, it really was like he was just the missing piece of the puzzle we were waiting for. And I love it because it started off as just like an art piece. And then I love my publishers so much. I feel like I love the rapport we all have about the book because they're all just as excited and they encourage me so much that they're like, we love him too. And I was like, we're at him. He's going to the story. Like he has to. I was like, I can't have him be on the cover and not in the book. And I found all of these places that he just fit so perfectly that by the time the story was done, it just never would have made sense without him in it. Like it would have, it just wouldn't have been quite as fun,
Yeah.
I think. So he had such an
Gosh.
interesting ad. So I'm like, Elizabeth Stokes, I put in acknowledgments that like Kingsley would be nothing without you. And that's so true because that character would not even be in the book if Elizabeth hadn't drawn him onto the cover. And we were like, who's this little frog prince with a crown? And I'm like, the crown's never coming off. It's somehow never going to leave his head. And we're never going to explain why.
I
It's never going to make sense.
That is so fun. Like I had no idea.
Yes.
And like in thinking about it, I feel like it would be so different without him. Like I can't even
I
imagine
know. I so
reading that
agree.
without him in it. He's
Yes.
so
Or even,
fun.
yes. And he's so much, I think he adds so much because I wanted him to sort of be like almost without like actually talking because he holds up his little signs. But I really wanted him to be like, um, Salem, like the little cat from Sabrina the Teenage Witch show,
Yes.
where he's like kind of sassy and adds like a little bit. I'm like, he fits so well. And I'm like, he'll just always be sitting on the villain's desk and like add his 2 cents,
Hmm.
especially when it's not wanted. And he's kind of like the unofficial office mascot next to the dragon, of course. And I'm
Hmm.
like, he's just so perfect that I'm like, and when we're mapped, I'm like, I mapped out book 2 and I was like writing the outline and stuff. And I was like, Kingsley, Kingsley, Kingsley. And I'm like, this would not be as fun if Kingsley wasn't in it. So I'm so happy that he's part of the story because he just, and again, going through, there was all these places that I was so easy to fit him into
Hmm.
different scenes and different spots. It required basically no extra work. It was just adding in something fun here. And it all worked because I was like, he was just always meant to be in the story. We just didn't know
Yeah.
it yet.
Oh my
So,
gosh. I just love that. That is so fun. He's seriously just like,
yes.
the whole book is fantastic and funny, and there's some fun surprises that Evie gets along the way, which as the reader were hilarious. She thinks the villain like is lying to her, and he's like, well, but like, and then Kingsley was just, he was such a fun added element. I really cannot imagine the book without him at all. So I love that
I know,
that's
me
how it came
either. Me
about.
either.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Yes,
crazy.
it really was because that's the part of the editing process where you kind of like fill gaps and fix things. And that was like, I think the biggest like thing that I was like, yep, it's perfect now. Well, not perfect. I
Right.
critique everything I do. So I'm like, still there's things where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But I think like he was the perfect add-in. So I was so happy that we were able to do that and that it just worked so seamlessly. Like it just really just flowed all together. So it
So
worked. And
fun.
I just love him. Like
Me too.
I want to cuddle him. I want
Right?
to pick him up and cuddle with him.
Maybe we can get you like a plush one. Like somebody can make like get a plush frog and like sew a little
Oh,
crown
I
onto his
would
head and like give him a sign or something. That would be so fun.
I would lose it. My friend has like a squishmallow that looks like I think it's supposed to be a dinosaur or something, but it has like it looks like a frog kind of.
Hmm.
And I literally picked it up after a glass or two of wine and was like, "Look, it's Kingsley. We gotta get it."
It's
And she
so
was like, "That
fun.
is a literal dinosaur." And I'm like, "No, it's Kingsley, and he needs this crown right now. Go get it."
Hmm.
Yeah, he's the best, the best. And every story should have a frog with a crown on it.
That's right. I was like, how does that crown not come off his head? Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's cute and it's there and I love it. So
Yes. I'm like, this frog is moving around. And I'm like, I thought at some moments, I'm like, should the crown fall off? And I'm like, nope, it's never gonna move and nobody's gonna question it. And it's
that's right.
not gonna be
And it's
gonna be
perfect.
like, huh,
It's
yes,
perfect.
I love it.
Okay, so I know you're writing a sequel. Is this going to be a duology or a trilogy?
So as of now, it is gonna be 3 books,
Yay!
which is really exciting. Um, book 2, I'm so excited for book 2. I have not, well, completely outlined, so we're starting to get into writing it now. And I just like there when I was writing book 1, I was like halfway through and I started daydreaming because I knew how the book was going to end. So
Hmm.
naturally, instead of just focusing on what I'm working on now, I started like daydreaming about, what am I going to have happen next in book 2? And I like this whole big sequence in book 2 that I'm so excited about that like I can't imagine. I don't think I've ever been like this excited to get something on
Oh,
paper. So I'm so stoked.
yay. Okay, can you do me a favor? Can you tell the powers that be, whoever this is? So, for everybody listening, if you haven't looked yet, if you order assistant to the villain, they are printing some with sprayed edges and it looks so gorgeous. And I have already pre-ordered mine. Like, even though I have the e-copy, I'm like, whatever, I need a hard copy of this sucker too. So I could just go to it and pick it up and look at it and, you know,
Yeah.
and I love that it's having sprayed edges. But now here's the thing: if there's going to be 3, they have to make the other ones with sprayed edges. Do you have any power in this?
We'll put we'll put it we'll put it out into the universe. I actually didn't even know. I was so excited about the spray. I didn't know that we were doing that until they showed it to me. And I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's
It is.
amazing. We'll manifest, we'll put it out into the universe. So we'll see what we can
Okay.
do. But yeah, it's really cool because it's for the entire first print run. So all of the first print run copies will have the red sprayed edges, which is just like so exciting because it's like a
Yes.
special edition in and of itself, which is so cool. Yeah, I felt so lucky that they were even doing that. They were like, look, we're doing this. First of all, the cover was so perfect. I like
Mhm.
cried, which is not shocking to anyone, but I did cry when I saw it. And I was like hysterical. And then they showed me the red edges, and I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Like not at all together. And I'm like, sorry, I'm trying to be like professional. And I'm like, I love it so much.
I do love the cover, and the cover with the addition of the sprayed edges makes me very excited as well. So yay.
Me too, me
So
too.
good. Hopefully they'll do that for the other two as well. You know, I
We'll
feel
see. We'll
we'll
see.
see. Okay, I have one last question that I wanted to ask you, and this is like a silly, fun question though, because I saw in something that I read, I don't know if it was the bio that the publisher sent me but I saw that you very frequently write while listening to Taylor Swift. And so as a huge Swiftie myself, okay, you can't probably see, but
Oh, I love it.
my nails are painted for Speak Now as of right
Oh
now.
my
So
gosh, my heart.
um,
Love it.
and I got my Speak Now CD yesterday. I
Oh
had
my gosh, I know
pre-ordered
I'm
it.
getting
So
the vinyl.
that's awesome. So
I'm
what's
excited.
do you have a favorite song, or do you just, like love all of
Yes.
them?
So this is so funny, and I've talked about this on lives before, but I don't actually listen to it while I'm writing because I cannot, for some reason,
Mm,
I can have the TV on or I can have like the ambiance things, but music for some reason is so because I just want to listen to the
yeah.
music. So I get distracted. So I listen to Taylor Swift and I daydream like up scenes, or I think of like how does this apply to this scene to get me inspired enough to like sit down and write it. So what's so funny and what's like so like this is why I'm like fate is real and like the universe is like real and everything is that I wrote a lot of it listening to or daydreamed a lot of
Mhm.
book one to the Speak Now album. Like
Oh,
almost I could almost match every single song to something that I felt connected with in the book to like something else. Like Never Grow Up is such a like Evie and her little sister song, and
mhm.
Enchanted was like I say that all the time where I'm like I think of that over their first meeting like all the
Yeah.
time. I feel like that would be their song if they lived in the real world. Enchanted would be Evie would be like, it's enchanted. And you'd be like, okay.
Yes.
All right. So I listened to actually like a lot of the Speak Now album, which is so incredibly cool. And then what's even like more wild, and I didn't tell them like a color or anything for the cover. They just they did such a good job and then showed it to me, and it was like they pulled it from my
Mhm.
head exactly what I pictured. And it was also purple. And I
Purple.
was like, oh my God, it's purple, like the Speak Now album. And I didn't even know. And the red edges are sprayed,
Yes.
which made me laugh because like there's in the original, she had the red dress on in the deluxe edition. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh my God. I was like, I think Taylor Swift is like God. she, I was like, she did this somehow. I don't know. Like
Oh my God.
it was just everything just lined up so perfectly. I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy. So yeah, a lot of the Speak Now album for sure I think relates a lot too. Because it's fairy tales and I think that's the whole
Hmm.
theme of the album. So I think it very much fits in with, especially in the new, I've been like daydreaming book two scenes to like the castle's crumbling song.
Oh
I'm
yes.
like, that's the villain. That's the villain, like in a nutshell, like that whole song. And I'm like, oh my God, it's all perfect. It'll be such fun.
Taylor Swift's like there's just so many things that it applies to, even
So many.
last night we were in the living room and we're had to like it was time for my boys to go upstairs to get ready for bed, and like one of them, my youngest, who's also a huge Swiftie, at 9 years old, which is totally my fault, but it's
Love that.
fantastic and I love it. So
No, no,
he
that sounds great.
he was like not wanting to go to bed, and then I just like popped into my head. I was like, I knew you were trouble when you walked in. I was like, this one right here. Like, you're trouble, kid. Like, there's just so many
Yes, she
applications for
has
Taylor
something for
Swift.
everything.
Yes.
Yes, she has
So,
something for like everything in life. Even when I read a new book, when I'm reading like a new book and then I put it down and I start listening, I'm like, oh, how can I daydream about this new book that I'm reading and what songs
mhm.
apply to it? Because you can always find so many that fit like so well. And one of my family members is rewatching Game of Thrones, and they're like, "Castles crumbling is literally Daenerys Targaryen," and I was like, "Why would you say that to me? What am I supposed to say that?" Yeah,
Oh.
she has something for everything, I think. So yeah, I think the Speak Now, everything on the Speak Now album I listened to like the whole thing while I was writing it. So definitely was a big daydream fodder for me when I was thinking of scenes for sure. But I think I also listened to a lot of folklore and Lover. I
Mm.
feel like I listened to all of them, but My Tears Ricochet, and I won't say why, is such an Evie song, especially at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the book. And it just, in a way that I like connected it. And then I
Yeah.
started crying. And my mom's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No,
This
I'm
is
not
for
okay."
Evie.
Yeah.
No, I get
Literally.
it. Well, so
Yes.
fun. So this is such a fantastic book. Assistant to the Villain, easily like when I read it, went to the top of my list of favorite books that I have read so far this year and absolutely love it. I have a feeling it's going to stay there at the top of the
Oh,
list.
so glad.
And everybody who is listening to this, you all need to go and get this book because it is the funnest rom-com, like fantasy YA rom-com that there is, and you will fall in love with these characters, and it is fantastic. So I am so happy that you were able to be here with me today, Hannah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for chatting with me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun. This was such a good time. I loved it.
Great. And Assistant to the Villain comes out on August 29th. And in the show notes for today, I will put links to Hannah's TikTok and where you can buy the book and yeah, all of that good stuff. So please be sure to check that out. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will chat again soon. Today's episode featured the book Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. A special thank you to Hannah for being on the podcast today, and also to Caitlin Kennedy at K Publicity for setting up the interview. Be sure to follow YA Book Chat on Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you get your episodes as soon as they are available. And have you checked out the YA Book Chat Patreon yet? You should. There are plenty of great perks at each level. YA Book Chat was created by, is hosted and edited by me, Leah Stuhler.